My friends, is this book still worth it? Hello, and welcome to another book review. And we're going to ask a very interesting question today. And that question is, there was a brilliant novel released in 1992 by an author that was working as a journalist on a journalist's salary. And he went on 34 years later to be worth over $300 million. Of course, that was Michael Connelly. And Michael Connelly's book, The Black Echo, regarded now as one of the great crime novels of all time, probably been the top 10 in history. This novel changed his career and changed his life and gave us Harry Bosch, of course, the TV program. So, Michael Connelly, The Black Echo. Is it still relevant? Is it still good 34 years later after it first came out? Well, that's an interesting question. So let me give you a synopsis of what happens in this book first, before we go into the pros and cons of this as a contemporary proposition. Okay, pros and cons. Okay, and sorry, synopsis first. So here we have a detective in the LA police force who has been demoted because he's messed up on a crime scene. He thought a chap had a gun under his pillow, and of course it didn't end up being something else, a rubber duck or something, God knows what. But it wasn't a weapon, so he ended up shooting this guy in self-defense, and he got demoted. Sort of thing that you find in sort of right-wing newspapers in Europe, like the Daily Mail. Oh no, poor policeman gets demoted. Anyway, one evening he gets to go and investigate a body, and he realises who this body is. This body is of his friend Meadows, who he served with in the Vietnam War. And there were tunnel rats, those that went down into the tunnels to flush out the enemy, and very few of them came back alive. And this tunnel rat friend of his looked like he'd been OD'd on heroin, but Bosch gets curious and starts investigating and discovers he didn't really OD. It looks like he was murdered. So why was he murdered? Well, he was murdered because he tried to pawn something which he shouldn't have pawned. And that pawning of a bracelet was from an outrageous bank robbery that had occurred by a bunch of bank thieves, including Meadows. They drilled under a bank, gone inside the vault, and taken a number of different items. One of those items was a bracelet. But whatever they were really looking for, the robbers hid very well by taking all sorts of different things to camouflage their real intent and their real intended target. So Bosch, over the first half of the novel, figures this out. And it's quite exciting, him sort of figuring this out and showing that, he's not popular with everyone. We learn a lot from the character of Bosch. That's something I'm not great at, my own writing. And we regard, some people are his friends in the force and some people aren't. And of course, at the same time, he's been investigated by Internal Affairs on his back while he's doing this investigation. Then he gets picked up by the FBI and asked to work with the FBI. And the FBI explained to him that he was also a suspect because he used to be a tunnel rat. Interesting. So just as this mystery around the first robbery has been solved, we discover that there's a second robbery about to happen in another bank. And then we're brought into lifetime as the novel picks up pace, and Bosch is having to figure out how to stop these robbers from bashing into another vault and stealing more stuff. So what we have is the background history of the writer. He was a Los Angeles Times police correspondent, I believe, and he wrote a lot about crime. And he was also into a lot of Vietnam history, of the Vietnam War. So those two things collide together and create this wonderful plot. Is it still got the punch to be read today, considering that things are a lot more quicker now? The novels are a lot more pacier, and their crime novels, I think, sometimes tend to become more action thriller-like. Well, the answer is yes. And the reason for that is the tempo in which this book is written. It's really, really well paced, extremely well paced, with a great sense of timing. What I mean by that is there's one layer of tempo which goes at a certain pace, and then there's a discovery by Bosch about the next bit of what happened to Meadows, and then it picks up a little bit more pace, and then you discover something else and it picks up more pace, and it's very well timed. As you get through the first part of the novel, which is discovering what this crime was, you discover there's another crime about to happen, and the pace picks up again. And it's very smooth. You can tell that Connolly has been a journalist for his whole life before he wrote the book. And he really writes smoothly, and it gets you right to the point where he can now pick up the pace in the last eighth, or probably the last sixth of the book, and then move in on the bad guys. Bosch moves in on the bad guys. So that's the general synopsis plus a bit of the pace. I think what makes it a great crime novel is the pace. I think that's the thing that distinguishes him from other people, and I think that's the thing that pushes him into the next boundary of top writers. And pace is always difficult, I think. Does it still have the punch? As I said, yes, it does. The downsides, there's probably not enough going on compared to today's crime novels. You have 3 or 4 big main characters, and you have a sort of a tunnel vision, excuse the phrase, of the plot, where he's trying to figure the first one out and then he leaps into the second robbery. And that might be too narrow, maybe, for today. But I don't think you can put this book down when you're reading it, because I think the tempo is brilliant. And I think you will pick it up and you will read it flat in 6 hours, maybe 7. If you had a good night's sleep, maybe 5. And I think it will just go, that was a good Saturday well spent, or good Sunday well spent. I justify spending my $20 US or whatever it is, or £10, or whatever these books now cost, in the bookshops or on Amazon. I don't think you'll regret reading it. So well done. It still holds the magical touch that it had 34 years ago. I think it won the Edgar Award for the best crime novel, from what I recall. And what is really endearing to me about Michael Connolly is he is very humble. If you watch any interviews or any talks that he gives, he doesn't like the limelight, from what I can see. And he plays himself down quite a lot. And that's a sign of real focus, I think. He's moving from one book to another book to another book. And I think that, I do like this kind of slightly complex rebel character that Harry Bosch has. I mean, it's a brilliant concoction, really, of different elements of anti-authoritarian, with a background that will lean towards complying, anti-institutional in some ways, which of course is popular in a lot of sort of in the Anglo-Saxon world. I think Bosch is somebody who is a little bit unreliable, and that makes him vulnerable and makes him therefore real. And I think that's what you get out of the book. So whereas I think someone like myself, we write invincible characters, of course, like comic book heroes, because we're frivolous. But he's not. He's serious. He's been reporting about crime for a number of years, and he's taken the best of his own experiences of what he's seen about crime, and made it into something that can entertain the public. So very well done. Thank you.